So following on from something that Louise said, I think it's been a fantastic few days. You know, we had the showing of Still the Enemy Within, which was packed out for 2 nights running, Thursday and Friday. We had the event at Wakefield, the Banners Held High, which was absolutely massive. I don't know how many people, perhaps someone would know, but I would guess over 1,000 people attended that. Attended by Dennis Skinner. For Dennis speaking alone, there were about 700 in the room. And then yesterday, despite the wind and the rain, again, I'm guessing at the numbers, but I would say probably around 500 people at Anfield for a march. A march that was several miles long, in the wind, in the rain, and how fantastic to see some of my old workmates and old colleagues in their 60s and 70s on that march. I mean, that's just tremendous, I think, really. I was relatively young during the strike. I literally had my 21st birthday literally on the picket line. We're going to look at a little bit about the strike, but not too much. Most of you lived through it in this meeting, one way or another. Also about the Facebook page that we mentioned, and more importantly, linking with the struggles that are happening now and how we're going to build a campaign and how we're going to build some action to try and reverse some of these things that have been happening under Labour and Tories since Thatcher. Okay, first of all, I'll start with some details about the page, 30th anniversary of the miners' strike Facebook page. We've got about 32,750 and rising on the page in 14 months. Now, for anyone who uses Facebook, that's an enormous amount of people. We've paid for no adverts at all, nor would we. They have enough money, I think. We've built that up by the hard work of the admins, which is myself, Mary Jackson, and my friend Bob Burnett, some of you know. And also by an absolutely amazing following that we've managed to build up, where people are literally on the page every single day. They're messaging me at all hours, even at 6:30 this morning. Mel, can you put the pictures on from Hatfield? Yeah, I'm just getting up. You know, it's a tremendous following of thousands of people that are daily involved in the page. But the page is not just nostalgic. You know, it's not just a case of looking at these events 30 years ago, and indeed looking at other struggles, such as we sometimes look at the 72 strike, the 74 strike, 26 strike, and other struggles. And even sometimes looking at pictures of old banners and old pitch checks, and these are quite interesting, but it's nostalgia. Nostalgia has its place, but it's not going to bring about real change. We need to look at those events of the past, learn from the past, and importantly, fight for the future. And we need to do that by learning, first of all, what went wrong during the strike. You know, we need to look at the betrayal by the Labour Party leadership. I think we have to first of all be very clear that Labour Party members, the vast majority of Labour Party members, were totally in support of the strike. I myself was in Liverpool for a week during the strike, staying with Labour Party activists, people who were collecting money, who were organising meetings, who were feeding us, everything. Tremendous. But there was a big gap, a big division between the majority of Labour Party members and the Labour Party leadership. The Labour Party leadership, in my opinion, were treacherous. We can discuss that and debate that if you want, but I'm not going to change. Also, the role of the TUC. Again, there's a divide. Working class people throughout the length and breadth of Britain supported the miners. It's not true, you know, that when we look at the north-south divide, if we look closely at what happened during the strike, some of the areas that supported the miners the strongest in terms of street collections and organising meetings and linking up with trade unions and community groups were places like Oxford, Brighton, London and Bristol. So it's not true that there's this north-south divide. Also on that, when we look at some of the strongest areas for supporting the strike, the Kent miners. The Kent miners were at least as militant as the Yorkshire miners, probably more so. The international support that we had, the international support from people in Ireland, in Australia, in America, South Africa, Poland, Russia, France, Belgium and many, many more places. And this is reflected today on the page where we have over 32,000 supporters on the page, over 3,000 of them are abroad. We have over 500 supporters in Australia, over 500 supporters in America and over 500 supporters in Ireland, which, considering we haven't been out to any of those places, is absolutely amazing. Also on the page when we look at it again, I mentioned the north-south thing. About 2,300 people on the page are from London. London actually has the biggest number of people. Now if you're wondering about Doncaster, Doncaster is second, and South Yorkshire as an area is easily the highest. But as a one place, London has the most people on the page. Over 40% of people on the page are women. On a page that's dedicated to the miners' strike, and you know, a macho industry, let's face it, might think, well, that's quite surprising, but anyone who lived through that strike and saw women not only standing behind their men, not only standing alongside their men, but quite often standing in front of and leading some of these things. Not just collecting money, not just doing the things that you sort of think of, the gender role of work, you know, working in soup kitchens and this kind of thing, which they did, but also out on the picket line, collecting money, speaking at political meetings, some of them never to return to the lifestyle that they previously had, which I think is brilliant in itself. So on the page, over 40%, well, 40% sorry, of the supporters of the page are women. The page itself not only looks at the strike and not only looks at mining-related materials and mining-related history, but also tries to link up with other struggles. We're in touch with people that are campaigning over the issue of water in Ireland, with people fighting against the bedroom tax. Last week a couple of us went to Wales. I spoke at the NHS rally, the rally that Michael Sheen attended, that people think only Michael Sheen was there, but we were there too. I actually spoke. And lots of other issues that we're linking up with people over. Because the important thing, as I said, is not just the past, but also more importantly, really, you know, to build a fight back now for the future. In the 30 years that have gone by, in the 30 years since the strike, we've witnessed attack after attack on working class people. I mean, really, the Tories have gone further than Thatcher did, further than Thatcher dared. You know, when we think of not only the attacks on unions and on organised labour, but attacks on employment rights, but also attacks on the right to represent yourself at a tribunal, the attacks on legal aid, the attacks on unemployed people, the attacks on the elderly and the sick, disgusting scapegoating of people, and trying to divide working class people along lines of race, along lines of age, along lines of ability and disability, and lots of other issues. And sadly, the Labour Party again, or the Labour Party leadership again, have been lacking even in terms of vocal resistance to most of that. The attacks that have been coming, and really there's been a class war going on. You know, it's fair to say that there's been a class war going on, but sad to say, at the moment only one side has been fighting for most of it. The Tories have been hitting us, and the TUC and the Labour Party have really done nothing to reverse that. And the unions, we don't need saying, the unions are as, you know, weaker now than they've perhaps been in my lifetime. But this is not all doom and gloom. It's not to say that things have to be that way. You know, the unions can be won over, the unions can be, you know, built into fighting organisations. I personally don't think the Labour Party can be, but the unions certainly can be. But the unions need to reach out too to people, because, you know, many people now have never been in a union, many people do not know what a union is even. Many people have never been asked to join a union, so it's not the fault of younger people for not joining unions, it's equally the fault of unions for not reaching out and actually trying to get people to join them. Unions are not relevant in the lives of many people, many elderly people, unemployed people, long-term sick, but they could be. And the United community actually is probably one of the better ones in terms of reaching out to people like that. Going back to the strike, we mentioned the food kitchens. We had the food kitchens in every pit village, in every mining community. Now, sadly, we have food banks in every major town and city. They talk about having a museum to Thatcher. We have memories of Thatcher. Every time you walk round and you see poverty, every time you walk round and you see houses boarded up, every time you walk round and you see a food bank. This is Thatcher's legacy. We don't need no museum, and we certainly don't need to be paying for it. Thatcher always, all her life, was in favour of private this and private that. When she dies, they ask working people to pick up the tab. When they're looking about getting a museum, they're asking for working people to pick up the tab. How hypocritical. And again, for the most part, silence from the Labour Party. I'd personally like to see that museum built in gold, though. It would last about 2 minutes.
Like,
if there are any ladies or gentlemen from the press, I'm joking, I don't want it to go, of course. Yeah. But gold would be as good a place as any in that sense. Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, you know, they talk about people being all in it together, you know, but it's certainly not the case. We've got increasing poverty worldwide. Meanwhile, globally, 5 super-rich families have more wealth than the poorest 20% of the population. What an absurd situation. What a ridiculous world we live in. Another world is possible. I think that's a socialist world. And if anyone's reporting that from the press, go ahead. I think it's time to end this absurdity. You know, I think we need to have real change. Now there's a general election coming up, but I think, sad to say, there's no major party, we can talk about Tusk in a moment, Mary, but there's no major party that's offering to bring about any real change. There's none of the mainstream parties that are going to change any of these things radically. Don't get me wrong, there's no one wants to see the back of the Tories any more than I do. But it's also true to say that, you know, if people are going to vote Labour, it's probably going to be because they're voting against the Tories rather than voting for Labour. I remember Arthur Scargill, who's certainly had a bad press. I remember Arthur Scargill saying that what we need is a party that's as loyal to our class as Thatcher is to hers. I remember hearing that as a young striking miner aged 20-year-old. It's as true today as it was the day I heard it. You know, 30 years ago, we fought for our jobs, and I think we were right to fight for our jobs. We were right to fight for our communities. We were right to fight for our union, and comrades, we were right to fight for our class. And I think now we all need to fight. We need to fight now to end the absurdity of 0 hours contracts, of scapegoating of unemployed people and disabled people. We need to fight to defend the NHS, otherwise there's not going to be one for much longer. We're going to be paying to see a doctor, which is something that has been floated for a long time. And when you see these things, sometimes these things hit the news and they start floating these ideas. And what they're doing is trying to get these ideas generally accepted. And then when they come up with, no, you won't be paying £10 or £15 to see a doctor, you'll only be paying £4. You think, hey, that's not so bad. But actually, it's disgusting. We're already paying for an NHS. We've been paying from the day we were born. And that NHS that people died for and fought for many years should be here. And it should be a cradle-to-grave system. Free at the point of delivery and free to everyone that needs it. Again, there's all in it together, as they say. But we've got, with the MPs, we've got cash for access, cash for questions, expense fiddling. We've got the sleeping lords paid for just turning up, and we've got the parasitic royal family. To think they closed the pits on the pretext that they were losing money. It was never about economics. If it had been about economics, the House of Commons, the House of Lords and Buckingham Palace would have been closed down years ago. It was a deliberate and systematic attack on the trade union, on the most militant trade union in the country at the time, the National Union of Mine Workers. I think that the Tories basically worked out that if they couldn't defeat the union, if they couldn't batter the union enough, if they would take the union out of the pits, I think they thought if they can't take the union out of the pits, they'd just close them, and that would take the union out of the pits. And I think that was the real reason. Because once they'd done that to the miners, there was the domino effect. Yeah? If you remember, not long after, there was the print workers dispute. And again, many miners from this town as well went down to Wapping. Let's not forget the solidarity that the print workers paid us during the strike. And at Asken, they sent a lot of money. They helped sustain the soup kitchen. They did tremendous work. That was repaid in many ways by miners going down onto the picket lines at Wapping. I'll tell you now, I was actually more scared at Wapping than I ever was at Aubrey personally, but that's another point. If they could close down these pits, they could then come in and attack other groups of workers like the print workers and organise labour. And I think if the Tories get in again, they're already talking about having tougher anti-trade union laws. And I fear that the rail workers will probably be the next. If anyone's not so sure about that, they're by far the strongest group of workers at the moment. And if the Tories win an election and they're very confident after that victory, I can see that happening. I hope I'm not scaremongering there. We have the situation where we've been, you know, the media have been scapegoating working class people. The Tories have been scapegoating working class people, claiming that people don't work and that people are work shy and that they don't work. We've had these ridiculous programmes like Benefit Street on TV, which, you know, ridiculous attacks and horrible attacks on working class people. And, you know, how amazing. They're talking about people that have worked. These attacks come from people that have never done a day's work in their life. People that have been sat on their asses in the House of Lords, the House of Parliament. They've never done a day's work in their life, the majority of them. Attacking working class people and claiming that they don't actually want to work. We've got the MPs saying that they need second jobs. Very strange, because they've been telling us how busy they are. They don't really have time for anything else. Now, amazingly, they have time for a second job. Well, I can think of a job that they could all do. In all their constituencies, sad to say, there are food banks. They could volunteer. They could volunteer to work in the soup banks. They could work, sorry, on the food banks if they really wanted to work at all. But of course they don't. It's just a case of greed. What a farce. What a situation we're living in. I'd just like to say that you know, it's about campaigning and about fighting for a better future, and a better future for all people. And I think what's been very noticeable at some of the miners' events is that I mentioned the older people on the marches, but it's also been wonderful to see people that were not even born 30 years ago taking part in these anniversary celebrations. And I think it's very important that we get people of all ages working together and fighting together to bring about some real change. Ken will be talking more about the austerity, but I think it's a case of linking these campaigns together. You know, campaigns against the bedroom tax and poverty, campaigns to save the NHS, and working together. I think that's, as I said, most of that is not going to be changed by the general election, whatever the outcome, I'm sad to say. Thank you very much.